It's the Political Free Agents podcast, and we are back for our Wednesday episode. We're doing a little bit early tonight because we have a lot of things that we got going on. But what's going on, CG? How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, dive right in, baby. Let's get it.
Mike will be joining us shortly. Yeah, Mike is going to join us shortly. He has some things going on. I think he has some computer problems. Yeah. All right. Sorry. All right. So Mike is going to come in shortly. There he goes. All right. So big news. There's no need to bounce around it. Kamala Harris is the VP pick for Joe Biden. So we're going to go ahead and dive into one, what it means, where this is kind of leading us, where it's going to kind of leave Biden. Will it help? Will it hurt? Yeah, all of that sort of stuff. And then also, let's just take a look at kind of how the news has been portraying this entire concept of Kamala being the VP pick. So, CG, we let out some good content at the beginning of the show.
We did, man. We really did.
Let's instead of trying to put lightning back in the bottle, let's try to let's go ahead and try to summarize what we were talking about there in terms of how this pick kind of plays out in terms of the racial makeup of it. So let's kind of start there.
Yeah, I don't know how much right-wing news everyone watches or how much left-wing news everyone watches. The divide was kind of a stark difference, right? I think the left really ran with it like, hey, it's a historical nomination. They've nominated a woman of color. They've nominated a black woman. And the right immediately moved directly past that. They passed go and didn't collect $200, and they just went straight to, she's not black. She's West, she's Indian and West African. And or Jamaican, I'm sorry. And, it immediately just went haywire on their side last night, trying to delegitimize that she was actually a black woman.
Which is fascinating in and of itself. Like, yeah. let's not step over that for a second. The fact that she's not black enough is the same thing they did with Obama. He wasn't black enough.
Exactly. And, you nominate somebody too black and they're going to Willie Lynch him. You know what I mean? So it's like there's no middle ground. You know what I'm saying? But I think everyone kind of saw this coming, because the one thing, you hear about identity politics a lot, and I think that's an entendre for a lot of different things. But what a lot of people don't realize is, politics itself has always been successful at chipping away at the identity of something, no matter what it is. But when it comes to the identity of race, it's largely been based off of stereotypes and racial stigmas. So when you start talking about people of color, you look at someone like Beto O'Rourke. Well, he's not a true Hispanic. It's a nickname. Okay. You look at someone like Kamala Harris. Well, she's not black. You look at someone like Barack Obama. Oh, well, he's half. It's never going to be enough. And then once it is enough, it becomes too much, right? And there's an overkill. So me personally, I felt they should have just went with the overkill and went with Stacey Abrams. One, because I absolutely love her. She is a amazingly pragmatic woman. But even some of the comments I saw, John, from black people, there was this notion that they were concerned of her being too black, so to speak, right? And I think that kind of shocked me, because I wasn't expecting that. What are your thoughts on it?
So I find it interesting. I tend to go this route whenever they want to discuss the racial makeup of Kamala or anyone else. I put it through a bit of a litmus test, right? If she was arrested for a crime, what would the headline say on Fox News?
Man.
Let's just simplify it to that. What would they call her in a headline if she was arrested, and let's say she wasn't a senator or none of that sort of stuff, right? They would not say, an Indian woman, because her mother is full-blooded from India, in that perspective, not Native American, just so we're clear here. But her mother is actually from Tamil Nadu, India. So she's full-blown Indian from that side. But what people are going to see is a light-skinned Black woman.
That's right.
Right. And so for that initial visual view, people are going to see a light-skinned Black woman. So it strikes me as very hilarious that whenever she gets selected as VP, all of a sudden she's not Black, which is fascinating because we have the history of things like the 1-drop rule. It says if you have 1 drop of Black in you, you're Black.
That's right.
Right. Now, if people looked at you and I together, you and I are about the same color. Like, we're not very different from our shades, but people would call me Black and you not. Right. So it's more of like the features and, that sort of thing where people refer to you as Black. The whole aspect of like colorism inside of the Black community is a big deal.
Yep.
It just is.
It is. It really
people, is. Yeah, people take that in a lot of different directions. I have myself, I use them by colors. So my kids are chocolate and 2 different colors of mocha, right? And so we joke about those sort of things. But it's a deep-rooted history of light skin versus dark skin inside of the Black community. So I've seen some of that coming up as well. But when it comes down to the identity politics of it, people think this stuff is new, man. Like, they think businesses putting Black Lives Matter on their websites is something new. It's really not. Like, businesses have always placated to the times, right? If they didn't believe in whites only back in the day, a restaurant would put whites only, because if not, they would lose their customer base, right? Same thing now with Black Lives Matter. Same thing with identity politics. All vice presidents used to be men up until who did Reagan run against? Reagan ran against I forget his name. I'll look it up.
The Black guy you talking about?
No, he basically nominated a woman as vice president, and he was Jimmy Carter's vice president.
It was
Mondale. Walter Mondale. So Walter Mondale, whenever he was running against Reagan, he nominated a woman and people went crazy. Mind you, this is the 80s, right? Like the 80s, a woman gets nominated as vice president and people go crazy over that as a concept, because why? The identity of the vice president was always a very specific type of person, which was a white male. Same thing for president. You couldn't have, Shirley Chisholm really never had a shot at winning because she wasn't a white male, right? Barack Obama kind of, quote unquote, broke that mold. And so now presidents can be anything, even orange. So identity politics is not new. It wasn't a big deal for me to hear that Biden was going to pick a Black woman because, well, what's the alternative? Sticking with the identity of white male, right? So anyway, the racial aspect of it, I just found fascinating, and I don't see anything wrong with Biden saying I'm going with a Black woman, even though Fox News came out last night and said that's racist to say I'm going to pick a vice president that's Black and that is a woman. So now that's racist if they actually don't pick a white male, or if they outright say they're going to do such a thing. So it's interesting. Like this has brought up a lot of issues I didn't expect to come up.
It did, man. I am blown away by it, and I'm blown away by it because I wasn't expecting to hear that, from Black folks, man. and I know a lot of black folks, and I heard it from multiple ones that, well, it was a safe pick because they wouldn't have liked the way Stacey Abrams looked. And I was like, Stacey Abrams looks like a classic black Southern woman. What are you talking about? And then it just kind of dawns on you that scares the hell out of some people.
Right. Like, so, all right. So Stacey Abrams, Stacey Abrams is a thicker woman. You know, they a lot will probably call her overweight. I don't know how tall she is, so I don't know what her overweight limit is, but she's thick.
5'11", I think.
Okay, she's taller than I thought.
I think.
So she's a little on the thicker side, and she has natural hair, right? So in terms of the black vote, she probably would have been a lot more palatable than Kamala, specifically on the point of their political history and their professional career. But I really do think that Kamala was picked because there's not many arrows that you can shoot at her from the opposition. I honestly think they didn't care about the black vote in this case. Not largely, right? I mean, would you pick, in this day and age, would you pick the quote unquote cop for your vice president in today's climate? Right? So I don't think they were looking at the black vote. I think they were looking at the non-black vote. One, you get a black person, and those who are quote unquote woke are going to be like, yes, black woman, I'm going for that. And then two, you maybe, I don't know. See, this is one thing. Let me transition here real quick. From the moderate perspective, do you think Kamala pulls moderates from the middle, or even some that are slightly right, over to vote left? And solely based on her criminal justice history, because she you can't attack her and say Democrats don't want law and order, but then you also say Kamala used to be a cop who processed death penalty and locked up all these people. So it's that conservative mindset of we need strong laws on law and order, but you can't attack her on that because you're talking
about white moderates, though, correct?
I guess so. I guess so.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is, that is like suburban women who are going to play big in this vote. They would be a white moderate, correct?
Yeah. That may be why Trump tweeted today about suburban women, suburban wives, or whatever he called them.
That's exactly why he did. The other thing that I'm curious about is what sorry about that. Being a girl dad, man, you're always rolling with multiple girls. So
yeah. That's all good, bro.
But the coolest thing is I get to see some of the best athletes in the state of Texas, so I ain't never mad at it. You know that?
No doubt.
One of them just got in the car right now. But I wonder with her Indian side how much of that too is actually gonna be, because you remember how successful Trump's howdy modi thing was in Texas. Yeah. I wonder how that's gonna play, because I do not know. I would have to think that they're probably largely conservative, and I wouldn't be surprised if they even voted largely like Hispanics did, because the family dynamics the same to some extent. I could be wrong, right, but I don't think I am.
I actually saw, and now mind you, small sample size. This isn't like a larger poll across the entire Indian culture. But I saw people last night stating that they couldn't wait to vote for the first Indian vice president. And so I'm not sure how that crosses over from a larger scale, but a lot of people are in that vein a little bit excited about what could possibly be from the perspective of basically a high level ranking person in the United States government that is from India, right? Like, I think that could potentially be a part of the appeal. But I don't know. I mean, and she's not just like, she has a drop of blood and heritage
She's
from
half.
India. Yeah, like she's half, and she grew up going to a Baptist church and a Hindu temple. So she knows the practices, right? And so I saw a lot of people culturally from there that were actually excited about that pick just from that perspective. And that's something I hadn't even considered, because I didn't even know she was part Indian. I didn't know that, until probably this year. So it's an interesting dynamic there. And I listened to the 538 podcast. 538, basically, they're like, look, and mind you, they're my go-to for polls. And they're like, look, we don't know how this adjusts the race or changes it, because there are so many different avenues here. One of the biggest knocks against her is her criminal justice career from a liberal perspective. So while I think it may hit, when it comes down to it, let's just for clarity, most people are single issue voters, right? They're going to vote based on some identity, like, oh, black president, I'm voting, or black vice president, I'm voting, right? And then also the inverse of that, obviously. Some people are going to vote for criminal justice or whatever, immigration, their jobs, whatever. Most people are going to stick to like one primary issue, and that's going to be their option, right? So the question comes in, can she move the needle and keep the liberal base from staying home? And I think that's her biggest obstacle, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too.
One of the things that works for her, as you had mentioned, is Trump, right? If Trump has messed up so badly that she can skirt through, that may not play well if Trump is not Trump, right? So the environment may be lit up enough to where they say, well, we need to get Trump out. I'm just going to hold my nose and vote for the cop, quote unquote. What do you think there?
I mean, I don't know, man. I would like to think that this race is probably unlike any other thing we'll ever experience in our lifetimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the shift has already happened. I mean, the shift has happened in a sense that from a political perspective, the largest, status quo voting bloc, which is the boomers, generation, are starting to die off. They won't be the majority in, 5-6 years, something like that, under 10 years. Everything that's coming underneath that it's not even going to be a small shift. Like, it'll be a radical shift because of the new generation of politics that's coming into play. And I think that's why you've seen such an extreme shift, either right or left, mainly right over the hard right these last several years, is because they know that that's going to be the case. When you look at stuff like gun rights, when you look at stuff like military funding, earmark spending, I mean, tax cuts, they've all been hard right talking points that have, gone into action. And, the one thing that I would say is they know what's coming, and Harris is going to signal that to some extent because she is a person of color. I actually, and I think it was kind of crazy now that, you look back on it, but, you remember her at the fair when she said she didn't have she never had a pork chop before. And I was like, bruh, and then I didn't realize that she was half Indian either, because she was parading around as a woman of color. So the first thing I thought was black. And I was like, damn, and that pork chop looked like it went hard too. I would have ate that pork chop, but it just, it's just certain things, man, that, I mean, those identifiers, I would like to think are going to start falling by the wayside after this election, because truly no one really cares about them unless someone physically says something about them. No one cares about them, and they've been an identifier for so long that I think that's another thing that scares people, that it's no longer working, John. So what? He nominated a woman of color. Cool. Everyone under the age of 35 doesn't care about that.
Right. Yeah, I think that
it'll be interesting, man, to see.
Yeah.
To see what happens. I don't know, I saw a tweet from him coming to my inbox, but I've been on conference calls for like the past 4 hours, so I don't even know what it said. But I know the headline said our predictions, something to the tune of our predictions are all over the place.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even want to pretend to know.
Yeah, I mean, so all right, so to back up partly, and I think on one hand, people are prisoners of the moment, right? They largely are. You tend to find that the vice president historically hasn't really moved the needle very much. That may change here. But generally, the vice president wasn't typically, you weren't really looking at them in terms of really doing a lot. You're just looking at potentially they will have control of, I don't know, some particular government mandate or a job that they will end up having to do, education or whatever, criminal justice reform, whatever. But you weren't necessarily caring if they, too much about their history unless they come out and they're like Sarah Palin, who just completely blows it. And you're like, John McCain is a little bit on the older side. What if he doesn't make it? Yeah, I can't see Palin being president. And so that kind of moved the needle, right? So in this election, I think they're having a hard time justifying or really analyzing this because on one hand, vice presidents don't move the needle. But on the other hand, Joe Biden is the presidential nominee, right? So if what they're saying is completely true, that let's just say, let's accept it as true, right? Biden has mentally declined. Okay. So what you're doing, and I put this in our chat last night, just a little tongue in cheek. What you're doing is basically electing the next black president, right? If Biden has declined and he's not going to make it 4 years, you're basically voting for Kamala to be the next president. How do you factor that into a model based on the polls and the data, that sort of thing? And they just don't know, man. Like I said, the people who follow all this data, they're not really going to factor it in right now. And they're just going to kind of see how this trickles out from that perspective. Because I mean, just as we laid out here, it's too hard to determine if it's one going to move the needle for the black vote. Will it increase turnout? Will it decrease turnout for the liberals? We don't know because of criminal justice. Will it increase turnout from the Indian culture? We don't know because of how they would normally vote. Like, is it going to increase the women vote? Will white moderate women cross over and vote to get the first woman to kind of shatter that glass ceiling sort of thing? There's way too many variables here.
Way too many hypotheticals in the equation, bro.
Absolutely.
Way too many.
Absolutely.
Way too many.
So in the long run, does it help Biden? The best we can do is we don't know.
Yeah.
There's no way to really tell. But here's something interesting. So I shared the video recently of the show Rising. And I'll find it and put it in the show notes. They basically skewered what was going to be basically the talking points of all of the liberal side of the fence. So basically, pardon me, throat messing with me. Basically, there's going to be a whole bunch of talk about sexism, right? So this is sexist, that is sexist. Because of her black side, this is racist, that is racist. What I didn't expect to see was the whole it's racist because you picked her narrative. That one was new. But I believe largely, from that video of on Rising, they were basically calling out what was about to come from the liberal side. And I largely agree that we were going to see those things, and we're already seeing those things. What's going to be interesting is which one kind of wins the day, right? So if you are, let's say, anti-sexism, you may just vote for the sake of, I'm going to defeat sexism, right? Or you see the racism going against her and like, forget it. I'm going to go against the racists, and I'm going to vote, you know, like solely based on the anti-racism narrative there. Um, I think it's going to be interesting to see how all of this is carried out in the news, and how the attack vectors are taken when it comes from there. But what we are not talking about, and this comes back to the whole concept of identity, we're not talking about any of her educational history, her work history, aside from the fact of the criminal justice things that she was involved in. We're not talking about any of her CV, basically, right? Like, is she qualified for the position? We're not talking about that. Right? We're not talking about her being a lawyer, or a former district attorney, or any of those sort of things. It's not that she rose through the ranks and went through DA to attorney general and all that. Not that's not the conversation, right? And I think that's what people miss, is when they go against identity politics. Technically, that's all they're looking at right now. Those who are against identity politics are right now engaging in identity politics and ignoring the merits. So whether or not that is sexist or not, I'm pretty sure there's a good bit of sexism mixed in there. It's something to consider and look at whenever you're analyzing the situation, because the question comes up, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but if this was a white Harvard educated male, would they really be focused on him being white at all? Like, will there be any discussion of him being white other than from a far left perspective? I could be wrong there, but what do you think?
Man,
My bad, CG. I accidentally hit the mute button there.
like I said,
I think we may have lost CG.
oh,
See if we can get him back here. All right, so CG is going into a building. He is having to square away his daughter with her practice today. So as he mentioned, girl dad, he's on duty right now, getting her squared away at their softball practice. So he'll join us back in a second. But largely, the point largely stands there, and we'll get his position whenever he jumps back in. But largely, I mean, we're looking at a simple case, right? We're looking at someone who is elected to vice president, and pretty much the majority of the news you're hearing about, or the tweets or the headlines, is about Black woman. I've seen some that spoke about her Indian culture, so the Indian heritage aspect is there. Um, we're not looking at where she graduated from. We're not looking at her educational history. The only part about her work history is the negative part. There's no talk about the positive aspect of her work history, just the fact that she oversaw uh, people being locked up, for marijuana charges, things like that. So in the primaries, I pose this question, and I'm largely posing it to you as well, from the audience perspective, just something to think about here. So as the attorney general, she can't just outright say, we're changing the laws. She could override some cases and things of that sort. And there's a lot of questioning to be done about the way, certain cases were being handled. And I'm pretty sure both sides are actually scouring her record to see what cases are there, what cases are actually problematic, let's say. So if she take the death row cases, there was a clip from the debates in the primaries where Tulsi Gabbard took her to task about hiding evidence and things like that. If all of that pans out to be true, and a lot of people are taking it at face value to be true, then it's a problem. They're going to attack her on that, right? And potentially rightfully so. If she was wrong in those cases, rightfully so. Is that who we're going to see as a vice president? Is it going to be someone who has this record, this history of, lawlessness as a law enforcement officer, quote unquote, right? So those questions are all fair game, right? And we can have those questions. I think the point coming into looking at her work history is people are looking largely for these headlines. They're not really looking into, was it really on her or incumbent upon her, right? So let's take a look at it, right? So as district attorney, she's being held um, to a particular standard for cases that she was in charge of and the way that they were handled, and because she prosecuted certain people, right? And she has certain discretion as the DA to basically take on cases and do certain things to that effect. If she takes on a case, let's say it's a weed case, because that's what a lot of these cases were. If she takes on a case and she handles it a certain way, uh, people are skewing her because she's a Black woman who is carrying out the laws of her state. She can't change those laws. If it's a weed case that she takes, and there's another drug offense case that comes up, she didn't take the weed case, but she did take this other case, or she did it based on color, like, oh, this is a Black man with a weed case, I'm not going to process, or I'm going to apply that one differently. Then we have a bit of a problem, right? Now, I'm all for getting rid of these weed laws, right? Because largely, I think they're stupid, right? So I think from that perspective, I understand the concept of what people were hoping she would be. But once you get to the place of specifically targeting cases purely based on identity, now I think we're kind of going backwards, right? And this is no defense of Kamala. I'm speaking in general of how I see laws being carried out. If you're going to handle laws differently for a Black person versus a white person, or you're going to lessen the charge for weed possession, but not being caught with, for selling weed or whatever the case may be, um, now we're just taking judgments and we're deciding, yeah, we're going to tweak the laws to our liking. The next person that comes in, they're probably going to change it and go the opposite direction. So it's a Pandora's box of, do you want to really open the gate to where a DA is outright making law decisions essentially on how to handle these cases, right? Understand they have some discretion to take certain cases to certain places and recommendations and all of those sort of things. So I'm perfectly okay with looking at her record and seeing where she may have incorrectly applied her discretion, things of that sort. But what I'm not willing to do is skewer her for doing her job. Her job as a DA, you can question that and say, why would a Black woman go be a DA as opposed to being a defense attorney? I mean, I don't know. If that's a problem for you that Black people are DAs, then okay. But I mean, I think on both sides of the aisle, you're going to have a little bit of both. Going up to the point of attorney general, now the discretion and the direction kind of goes in a different way. She can't outright just rewrite laws. She does have to end up implementing the laws of the land. And this was all in California, by the way. So she was a DA in San Francisco and the Attorney General of California. So I think that changes as well. And you have to look at those cases on an individual basis and see where there are legitimate problems there. Was like, so there's a number that comes up. I believe it was 1,500 people were, what was it? 1,500 people were convicted of weed violations under her watch, 1,500 to 2,000, something like that. So if there's 1,500 to 2,000 people who were convicted, majority of them Black people, uh, the law of the land is, and I don't know all the cases, but let's say they broke the law. So should she have not carried out the law, right? And I think you can look at the individual cases and determine whether or not uh, she carried it out effectively, appropriately, those sort of things. So I'm not making judgment on any of these cases because I've not seen any of them, right? But I think largely we have to look at it and determine whether or not we want to hold her feet to the fire for doing her job, or whether or not we want to hold her for not effectively or properly doing her job, right? I think there's a thin line there. So let's take Barr, for instance, right? People are up in arms and mad at Barr for siding with Trump on whatever the case may be, right? Now imagine if Barr came out and was like, you know what, white weed dealers we're not going to prosecute. How would you take that one? Right. So I look at it the same way, and I tend to do this anytime I'm trying to analyze a situation, is if the majority of those 1,500 convictions were Black, how would I feel if it was a white attorney general who said, we're going to make sure we process all 1,500 of those differently than we process the other 500 white convictions? I wouldn't like that. And I wouldn't want that door opened for the next person to come in as the AG and start applying it differently based on their own identity politics that they want to attack, right? Or protect, right? So again, I don't know these cases. I don't know whether she did right by them or not. All I know is that from a perspective of doing your job, if she didn't fight to change laws, or she didn't go against these particular death penalty cases or things of that sort, why? Right? I'm not interested in headlines. I'm not interested in talking points. I don't want to hear, she did this and that's all you're going to tell me. Why? Why did she do those things? So the now quote unquote infamous video of Tulsi skewering her at the at the primary debate, and Tulsi took her to task. Like she kind of ripped her a new one. What people aren't getting is the next part of that clip where Kamala kind of responded, and she basically stated like, you're calling out the death penalty numbers, but you're not looking at the other side of it, where there's another family on the other side that is looking and saying, why aren't you going for the death penalty? My insert family member here, my daughter, my husband, my brother, my uncle was shot in the head here. How do I tell that family, no, I'm not going for the death penalty, right? So none of this stuff is black and white. It's not. It's just simply not. It's not. Even if the identity politics are leading everything down that angle, like from a racial black and white perspective, it's not black and white. Like you have to judge based on those individual particular cases. Now, she says that she's always been opposed to the death penalty. As the AG, she had to, again, it's the law of the land. She had to abide by the laws of the land. I'm not sure if that's why she became a senator, so she could help change the laws of the land. So she could now become she became a senator in California. I don't know. But my main thoughts here and purpose is dig in, dive into this information. Don't just take what they're telling you, good and bad, right? If they're telling you 1,500, people were convicted for weed violations, okay, good and bad. Why were they convicted? Was it the laws of the land? Did she create the laws? Did she unjustly apply those? If she did, skewer her. Don't vote for her, right? Or don't vote for Biden, I guess, right? If she did and you still don't like it, what's her position in policy now on these things? And so let's rewind a little bit and let's look at Biden. If you're voting for Biden now because you feel like he is going to be a better choice for the people, if you rewound to 76, 77, something like that, and Biden is talking about he doesn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle, is that the same person that you would vote for? Well, physically, yes. Mentally, no. Well, I'll say no. but I don't know him personally to say if whether or not what we're seeing is just a ruse of good old Joe, the friendly old white guy, that loves black people sort of thing. Because there was a time where you could make the argument that that is not who Biden was. And that wouldn't be a hard argument to make because we have video, we have footage. In fact, Kamala Harris skewered Biden, and I pretty much thought his campaign was over after Kamala destroyed him on the primary stage. Um, so it becomes the point of, and people do this on both sides of the aisle. They protect their own by saying that was a long time ago, right? But then they go after the other side by saying this is who they are. They haven't changed, right? So when it comes to Kamala, Biden, or even Trump, whoever, you have to determine at that point in time, have they changed? Are they the same person or not? Right. So you can go back to Kamala's record. Let me see. When was she? She was DA in '07, right? From '07, or I guess '07 or '08 to 2010. So you have to determine if the person who was the DA is the exact same person now. Um, it's hard to know because of just general politics. They're going to, protect themselves. You have to determine whether or not they're the same. Um, Maya Angelou, if someone shows you who they are, believe them, comes to mind, right? So don't take it based on campaign speeches of what she's doing right now, okay? Because what she's saying right now is to get elected. That's how all politicians work. Same thing for Trump. What Trump is saying now is to get elected. Biden doing the same thing. All the senators that are running, any other Congress people who are running, uh, same thing. They're saying something to get elected, right? But you need to look at the track record and see what kind of progression have we seen from Kamala to inform us that she is the right choice for VP understanding, right? So as DA, did she do certain things that she continued to do as AG? And then as senator, did she continue to push and fight for those things, those same concepts and things? Or did she change? Did she shift? Did she decide, you know, I was wrong for those sort of things? Because I can tell you right now, if this show was going on 8 years ago, you would have heard a completely different John Bland. It's just a fact. 8 years ago, I wasn't 40. I'm a different person. I'm a different father. I'm a different position financially than I was. Like things have considerably changed from the overall landscape 8 years ago of who I was as a person and the environment that I was living in to who I am today. Right. So I think a lot of times we don't allow that sort of grace with politicians to kind of see have they changed. Um, but we should in general, no matter who your party is, we should look to see have they shifted, have they adjusted, have they learned, right? So let's take a Trump example, okay? So let's say um, Trump with the Second Amendment, okay? So Trump with the Second Amendment, he campaigned and he said we got to protect our guns, and he's still back on that sort of thing. Joe Biden is going to take all your guns away on day one, sort of thing. That sort of fear mongering is what Trump is doing right now. But after, I believe, what was it, Vegas, the Vegas shooting or massacre? After that, Trump started saying, "Oh, we need to get rid of bump stocks." Right now, if you ask a hardcore to a person, um, some like a Colion Noir sort of thing or Maj Toure, you're not going to get them to agree to any sort of gun laws or any like gun changes, right? Because they believe I have the right to own these things, right? Or let's say in the case of like bump stocks, maybe they're like, yeah, not really a thing. They're not used for a lot of crimes. They were used for this one. So don't make a law based on one event that changes, the ability for me to own and buy this thing, right? All right. So the 2A, quote unquote, the Second Amendment, the 2A president, uh, who said that he's going to protect your right to own guns, also mentioned, he didn't do anything, but he mentioned we need to possibly look at what we do about automatic weapons. And I'm considering uh, some action on bump stocks and then these larger magazines and these sort of things. So now, wait a minute. You were the president for the Second Amendment, right? So why are you now backtracking and saying you want to look into possibly making some changes specifically related uh, to the Second Amendment that aren't in my favor as a Second Amendment supporter, sort of thing, right? So those sort of things on the left, that should be welcomed, right? Like if you are anti-gun, or if you just feel like I'm pro-gun, but I feel like there should be some better guardrails around guns, whether it's background checks or whatever, you would think that would satisfy you in a way, at least a portion. Maybe it doesn't go as far as you want, but that would satisfy you. But people aren't going to even consider the fact that Trump is open to changing gun laws on either side, right? Because the fear mongering says that Trump is the one that's going to protect my guns and Biden is the one that'll take them away. But flip this around, we can go even a little bit further back with Obama. Obama basically stated several times, and he went through the process of protecting the Second Amendment. So you're not going to get that from the right side. It's not going to be happy about that because that's not what they've been told to be fearful of. And the left isn't going to be happy about that, but they're not going to hold his feet to the fire about it, to an extent. Some people may on both sides. So we're told which things to be upset about. We're told which things to be worried and concerned about. And largely people are just believing them. They're just accepting it. That, yeah, this president or this pick or this person is not going to be right for this. But what we want to do is find somebody that can look back and you can say, okay, 8 years ago, Kamala was like this. 3 years ago, Trump was like this. From a progress standpoint, I see now that Trump has learned and he's going to be like this. He has adjusted his course. He's not going to be a hard, right wing person. Mind you, he is. He's doubling down. But the point is, you're seeing that, okay, even for the 2A perspective, somebody from the right is going to be like, okay, yeah, Trump has backed off of that ledge of changing the gun laws to benefit liberals, quote unquote, or the anti-gun, let's just say, segment of the population. So you've kind of seen him move back. So we need to look at things from that perspective, and we need to get away from identity politics. Like, I don't know, people are people, right? I used to always get asked the question, like, what do you think is going to take for racism to end? And I just tell them, not like, it'll never end. Like, let's just be clear. Racism is not going anywhere. And if it does, it'll get replaced by something else. Now, I don't care what you feel about racism, about it existing or not. You are not going to see people just stop grouping themselves. You're just not. And race is the simplest group that people can utilize, because they can't use color. Like I mentioned earlier, me and Chris, we're about the same color. I mean, look at this graphic. We're all largely about the same color, but we come from three different heritages. Well, Mike and I actually share half of one, but we come from three different heritages. Well, four, I guess. Yeah. So, but we still would be called a different race. So race as a construct, a human made thing, doesn't really even truly exist, but we group by that. So if I was, caught and convicted of some crime, it would be black man. If I got shot by the cops, it would be black man, right? If I shot the cops, it'd be black man. Even though DNA wise, I'm majority white. Breaking news. But they see black, they would assume I was black, right? So even a lot of friends who never knew that I was half white until they meet my mom, and they're like, well, what? I thought you were Mexican. So, it's people see race, they make assumptions based on race, and that's just what it is, right? And you can't determine based on uh, the initial view of somebody if whether or not they are liberal. You can't. If I took a headshot of 50 liberals and I took one of 50 conservatives, you would not be able to tell them apart unless you knew them. But let's just say completely unknown people, you would not be able to tell them apart. You couldn't say that's a liberal, that's a conservative. You could try. You could try if you see somebody with a white dude with the big beard and you think, oh, he's a redneck, he's a conservative. Nope. That's not even true either, because you can go look at Bo from the Fifth Column. Look him up on YouTube. You would think he would be a hardcore conservative if you were just going off of visuals, right? So you can't do that. People are going to find a way to group, and you can't determine whether or not people are a certain way based on looking at them beyond race, quote unquote. So racism isn't going anywhere because people are always going to group. And that's the easiest group. You can't find me another group because you can't say it's based on wealth, because you'd only know if somebody was wealthy if they were walking around in a wealthy scenario or driving around in like some super wealthy car. Somebody gets out of a Bentley in front of your house, it's like, oh, snap. If they have a driver, it's like, okay, that's a different level of wealth. But again, if you put them side by side and just headshots, you will not be able to tell that person's wealthy over that one. So it boils down to race is the easiest group that people can use. And that's what they're using with Kamala to bring this all back around and put a bow on it. They're using race with Kamala because it's the easiest thing that they can target. I just urge you to go deeper. Whether or not you see black woman and you're saying, hey, I'm voting for her because she's a black woman, go deeper. If you see a black woman and you're saying, that's identity politics, why do you think Pence was picked? You think Pence was picked by Trump because he was the absolute best option as a vice president? No, he fit a mold. And you can say white maybe wasn't the mold. I can say maybe it was. Neither one of us would technically know. But he was picked because of a mold, a certain very particular type of person. That's why Silicon Valley investing largely goes to white guys who remind them of Mark Zuckerberg. And I'm not making that up. You can listen to investors and from all sorts of walks, and they'll tell you there's a certain look that if they see that, they're like, oh yeah, I'm interested in this person, right? Identity politics exists. It always has been. It's not going anywhere. People are going to group. This is just what it is, right? So I just urge everybody to dig deeper. If you're going to vote for Biden, cool. If you're voting for Trump, cool. But dig deeper. Don't just level it off as left versus right, because there's always a little bit of gray area. All right. We want to thank you guys for joining us at this different time slot. We did this differently because we just all had a lot of things going on. And tonight's just a little bit of a different night. I'm actually going to be moderating a conversation tonight at 8 Central Time. I'll put it on my, actually I already have it on my my Twitter. Just check me out, twitter.com/John C. Bland II. And basically at that point, I'm just going to be discussing the different options and kind of helping moderate the discussion and get some other local politicians from Arizona to talk about this. So I'm looking forward to that. So that'll be in about 52 minutes. I'll be doing that. So join us there. Also check us out, all of our other content at PFA Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also find us at politicalfreeagents.com. We are there. We go live every Sunday, 2 p.m., Wednesday, 7 p.m., other than tonight, obviously. But check us out. Let us know what you think about the show. We have some exciting things coming up. We're really looking forward to some of this new content we're going to start providing. And we're also going to be pushing here soon some other angles from let's just say hot topics. I don't want to give away too much. I I mentioned it on Sunday, but I don't want to give away too much because if I do, it'll kind of spoil the surprise there. But look forward to it. It's coming up soon. We're really excited about it. So anyway, hit subscribe, hit like on YouTube, join us in the chat. We love to hear from you and get your thoughts as we go through the show. So we're the Political Free Agents, and we're out.